Okay, I'm going to call the Yellow Springs Village Council special work session on housing to order. And I think it's 4:10 approximately. So Judy, before Judy does the roll call, I'll just note that we are doing a hybrid model. We have some council people and staff in this room and a couple people on Zoom because of COVID issues. So Judy, would you call the roll?
Yes, McQueen.
Here.
Ouch.
I'm here.
Thank you. Stokes. If he's not here yet, he says he is on the way. Brown.
Yes.
DeVore Leonard.
Yes.
Thank you. Also present are Planning and Zoning Administrator Denise Swinger and Village Manager Josue Salmeron.
And this guy.
And that guy back there.
That guy in the orange shirt.
Johnny.
I'm here.
Nice camouflage there, Johnny.
Well, okay. Thank you, everyone. We're having this special work session because council and village government have identified housing as a critical issue in Yellow Springs and an issue that's more complex and comprehensive than we can cover very well in an actual council session. So the way this meeting came about is I had developed an initial agenda and Gavin had some input into it, as did Judy and Ryan. And it was decided that the number of topics were really too big to cover in a 2-hour session. So what you see before you, those of you who have an agenda before you, is that what we hope to cover in the 2 hours. And I'd like to just go over that agenda a little bit and tell you what I'm thinking of how that will go. So this is a session of council for council members to talk together. And we're fortunate to have our three senior staff with us who all have some experience and clearly competence and concerns probably to add regarding housing. So the first 45 minutes we want to spend on getting input from council in particular on whether there are any changes or needed updates from the comprehensive land use plan, the most recent land use plan, which Denise, and thank you, Denise Swinger, for compiling a really helpful resource, I think, that pulled out things from the Bowen's housing study from 2018 and the comprehensive plan, which we did in 2010 and then revised in 2020. So we'll do some go around discussion. Do we need anything else beyond those what we haven't, that the information from those documents? And then I'd like for us to look at what do we see as the priorities in terms of housing. Both, it could be affordable, it could be market rate. And then talk about what are the opportunities and potential parcels on which housing could happen. To suggest that we only talk about village-owned properties in this session. There clearly are properties in the village where housing could happen, but they're either privately owned or owned by other public or private entities. And I don't think it's productive or effective for us to talk about that in this session, but as we develop a housing committee, presumably we'll do that. Some of those discussions could happen in that place, I think. And then the next topic is to look at what are the mechanisms that the village government has to encourage and facilitate housing development. And I think staff will be particularly important in this topic because that's where they in particular have information. And the idea is this work session is to be getting out the main ideas, the opportunities, the concerns, the next steps that we think we need, but not drill down deeply into anything. And Judy, our clerk, is taking notes, and we will be able to access those notes in order to get more detail. So then we'll wrap up the meeting looking at next steps. I'm assuming that we are going to say that we want to have some group sort of move this forward, whether it's a task force or a committee or whatever we want to call it. And so we can talk about our ideas about what the charge of that group should be and any ideas we have regarding the structure. And I'm going to suggest that Brian and I take the minutes notes that Judy has created and what we're hearing from everyone, and come back to a village council meeting, whether it's the next one or the previous one, with some proposals based on what we discussed here today. So does anyone have any questions or things that you think need to be added before we get started?
So just so I'm just kind of getting in the right frame of reference, when you talked about like not drilling down too much, what we're trying to do here is kind of get the sort of where are we going, like longer, sort of bigger picture, like what's the direction we want, and make sure that there's not some like notable dissonance or disagreement, and that we all sort of have an opportunity to bring up the things that we're thinking about related to housing, and then see if we can, at least in the broad strokes, get some agreement on where our main priorities are. Is that a fair summary?
We'll see.
Okay.
I see it that way. I see it that way. I think it's important for us as the administration and the folks that do a lot of the legwork, that whatever we do,
Speak up.
oh, sorry, that it's important for us as the staff that whatever we do, that it has the support and that we're heading in the direction, so that when it comes to council or other decision-making bodies, that it's meeting the expectations. And so we're going to be more successful in that way. So I find that alignment with what you're saying. What is the general consensus? What things can we develop consensus on so we can have a direction of where we're headed? And we'll figure things out along the way.
And remember, the work session is not a session where we make any decisions. So
Sure.
it's possible that some varying viewpoints will come up in this session. They will have to be dealt with, but they probably won't be dealt with, or they may not be dealt with in this session.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's start, and I'd want to start with council members. Are there any changes or updates that you think we need to be thinking about, in addition to what was in the packet regarding the comprehensive land use plan and the Bowen housing study? And let's just do individually. So, Gavin, do you?
Well, I can try to you just answer this first question. Changes or updates needed? I mean, the thing that I think wasn't in there was like priorities. So like, for instance, the Bowen housing study identifies different like numbers of units, but it seemed like maybe there could be some value in saying like which things do we want to prioritize in terms of what we might use resources for organizationally. Again,
That's in the agenda, the next step.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, Denise and I met recently and talked about there are other things, in the land use plan related to, if we're only talking about the housing pieces, there's questions around parking and other dynamics but I don't think in terms of from a housing perspective, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Maybe we could say, given that we have the sort of general directions that have been identified within the comprehensive plan, I think, of the kind of housing we want and ideas of maybe where it would be. And we have the Bowen study. Are there any other kind of major is there any other kind of major research or study that you think needs to be done? Or do you think that we have enough background resources or information? And we move forward with the information that we have.
So can I suggest that maybe, Denise, if you just give like a elevator speech on, since I think you are the closest to the Bowen study and the comp plan, what you think has been elevated, and then maybe that'll help us kind of like, work into this, I'd like to hear your high level view based on.
Okay, well, to me, it's apartments. If we were gonna use village land, I would think we'd want to go in that direction. I think that the higher end homes, if we annex more land and have a big development like that again, it's probably going to end up being a developer that's going to do those higher end homes, single family dwellings. I don't think we need to really focus on that from the Bowen study. But I do think the middle income, the missing middle, which is like, you do your fourplex units or just straight out apartments, is a big need.
So to answer your question, then I'm not sitting here thinking, I feel like I need a bunch more information, but I also am one of the newer ones here, so I don't pretend that I have a super strong grasp on it, but generally the answer is no.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and no from me either. The information is here. It's comprehensive. Both the Bowen study and the comprehensive land use plan. So I think that, so no on that, and that'll lead into what you were talking about with where are their priorities going to be, instead of just bare numbers that the Bowen study presents. The next thing is what priorities.
Okay. Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, so first of all, I think to me what the comp plan and the Bowen housing study like highlights is we need more housing, period. But in particular, I'm also focused on affordable rentals. And so, I appreciate, Denise's like very brief summary around, apartments. But I think what has risen to the top and what we've heard over and over again is we need to think about families. And I think that's also, tied in with like a thriving school district. And we need to think about not being a bedroom community and all the folks that work in town that would like to live in town. So, but I will say, I think we've done the research. And so, I agree with what I've heard so far that, now it's about how do we start to, action that. So.
So Kevin,
Yes,
welcome.
thank you, thank you.
What we're talking about is going through the agenda and we're asking the question, do we think we need any more studies or broad-based research on our housing needs that haven't been identified in what Denise had in the packet, the comp plan and the Bowen?
Yeah. And I think based on what I caught my colleagues saying, I think we've got enough information. And it's just about the action plans that we've been talking about creating. So, and Brian alluded to action. So we certainly, and I'm not answering the question as to whether the studies we have are complete and 100% appropriate, but we have enough information, I think, to act responsibly going forward.
All right. So I would just add, I agree, I guess, with what everyone has said. I think housing has probably just the needs have gotten worse. Housing's gotten more expensive. And I think the only change is that there now is this national drive to change zoning across the country. And essentially do away with single-family zoning. And that is a change that's happened since 2018. But I agree with everything that other people have said. So then what do we see as the priorities, in particular priorities that we as the village council, village government should focus on? And any council member wants to jump in? I mean, we've sort of been talking about it. I'd like to start with council.
Well, I wanted to get a chance to weigh in on that item because you
okay.
asked all the council folks. I don't think there's any changes that are needed in either the housing assessment or the comprehensive land use plan. When I came on board, the comp plan started after I came on board, and I thought it was a robust model to approaching community development. It included housing and economic development. So I think it's robust. The challenge I've had with the plan has been that we certainly believe it because we sort of live it. We have had things come up and citizens are just either just come across as being surprised that such documents exist, or the partners that we're working with don't acknowledge all the work that has gone into the comprehensive land use plan. And staff and planning commission put a lot of effort into these documents. I find that there's times a disconnect between the work that has been done and the community buy-in of this work. So how I think one of the things that we need to do is close that divide between the work that has gone into planning efforts and the community understanding and getting on board with what has been done. I think we all acknowledge that there's some citizens that attend all these work sessions and contribute, and there's others that stay on the periphery and don't jump in until the last minute to either use it against the project or not. So I think that how do we get our community to have greater buy-in and adoption of all the work that has been put into these planning documents?
Okay, thank you. So that
And
will
not that
be
that's gonna-
something to think about, assuming we do move forward on
Yeah.
one or more projects.
Right, and it's not something that we're going to solve here at the table,
No.
but being aware that that exists, like how many efforts haven't there been around glass farm? And every time there's, some opposition to the glass farm, that some work hasn't been done or there's something missing, and I think everything has been explored on glass farm. So just something to be mindful as we move forward, that these planning documents are going to require constant selling to our residents. From all of us, not just from us here.
I'd like to request that we stay on agenda.
Okay,
So the question on the floor is, what did council think of as priorities? First of all, if we're talking housing, I'd like to know,
we're talking housing.
since we're talking housing,
That's what we're talking
and the question is about priorities, well, what is the pool of options? I'm inclined to say, if all the housing possibilities are on the table, why not do them all? I don't know what all of them are, but
Well-
why do we have to pick and choose? And I don't know that we have so many that we would have to prioritize.
So we could look at opportunities. I felt it would be good to divide opportunities and priorities. Ideally, we would want to do our priorities.
Mhm.
Now, maybe the opportunities don't exist. but
Mhm.
I'd like to start with priority. What do you think, Kevin, are the priorities? The village's government is going to put some effort into housing. What do you think our priorities should be?
Every currently available opportunity.
So you don't care whether it's high-end housing or rental or senior, or you don't care, just housing.
To the degree that we don't often have as much sway in determining what houses get done. Like, we appreciate what is happening over here on, I'll say Wright Street, Kinney Farm, but those folks, they're doing what they want to do. If that was not a top priority, do we say don't do the project? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a shovel-ready project that we should say no to. And every opportunity that presents itself, every real opportunity, tell me why we're not considering all of them. Now, I'm saying that I still don't know. I don't know that we have more than 2 or 3 things going on. And I'd like for us to wholeheartedly support all of them. And yeah, it's almost random how you prioritize the 2 or 3 things that exist. But other than that, I mean, we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Okay, well, let's see
Mhm.
what any other council person want to weigh in on what you think. If the village government is going to put some kind of effort into housing, what are the kinds of housing efforts that you think we should support?
Well, I guess I want to say intentionality can make a big difference. And so, Kevin, I don't disagree with you about, facilitating like other things that are happening because it's part of the market. But I think this discussion is more about where we're going to put our focus on intentionally making things happen. So, yeah. So I don't want to lose sight of that. I think.
So Brian, since you have the screen, what would be your priorities?
Well, I said it earlier, but I think we've gotten a clear signal from the community that we need to facilitate housing for families. And I don't want to lose our school district. And we need to have affordable rentals. And I believe, and we'll get to this more later. We've got properties, we've got mechanisms that can facilitate that. And I guess you've got municipalities all around the country that are, intentional around that. Gavin and Marianne have a lot more experience in this. I think staff as well. But yeah, I think our goal, today is where do we put our focus and efforts on what we want to make happen, realizing that, Kinney Farms and, other things, will happen as well. And we want to facilitate those. But yeah, there's no doubt that we can make a difference in this regard. So, because it's happening everywhere.
Ryan, excuse me, Carmen?
Sure. So I kind of echo the statements of Brian and Denise. The general consensus from informal one-on-ones with community members is apartments.
Yeah.
Apartments. And that, those opinions come from people who are in the upper level income, who already have homes in town, who already own a couple properties in town, down to people who want to live in town, or community members that already live here that are trying to find another apartment to move into. Yeah, because our stock is, yes.
Yeah. I think it's been the 70s, probably the
Right.
last time.
Right. And so that's the general consensus. Yeah. And so even if I had a different opinion about it, the reason why I'm here is because of the community members that helped get me here. And I would be remiss if I didn't take in their feedback.
Yeah, I feel like I echo the sentiments, very much support apartments. I feel like affordability, I think has been the major conversation in the village. And I think if we're going to take a role on promoting, building, developing affordable housing, and obviously we need to define that. We need to figure out, what median incomes are we talking about? You know, I think maybe there's some more work to be done there. I guess I don't know if that's like another study is needed, but I think we should have some discussion about what we're talking about when we say affordable. And then what Brian said about, young families, I think that certainly feels like it's an area of need. I'm concerned about when we get the studies back about the ages in the village, it's a little bit scary, how far, down this road we've gone. So, yeah.
Thanks. Well, I agree that rental, I think if the village government is gonna help get some kind of project going, that it makes sense for it to be rented for a couple of reasons. One, because I think that's what we need most. And two, because no one's doing it. And no one's doing it in part because it's very difficult to do. And probably in part because, as Josue was mentioning, there are going to be people who are opposed to it and have been opposed to it in the past. So getting a project together and then getting I don't want to say marketing behind it, but making sure that we have the support for the project is critical because, I forget who it was, said, maybe it was at the Planning Commission, that Ober had tried to do a rental unit here in the 70s maybe or something, and they were
Art metals.
booed out of town essentially. So I think times have changed.
Let's hope
So-
times have changed.
So I would say that we have a consensus at the table. Except for you who
No.
want to do everything.
Well,
or
yeah,
anything.
well, yes. We have consensus.
Okay, that focusing on rental, making some decisions. Families were mentioned, probably, at least we're not probably talking about high end, though maybe there'd be some room for some high end, but
Yeah, I
more
would,
moderate.
yeah,
and-
some high end too, just because, or some high end condos. I mean,
Mhm.
because we have a lot of seniors that would like to move out of their houses
Mhm.
and end up leaving town because they can't find anything here. And that would stimulate families going into those houses.
In other words, some attached housing.
Yeah, like duplex, like the
Duplexes.
patio homes, yeah,
Yeah.
1 story.
And now that what Denise said, just, as a sort of, as a sidebar, is senior housing to capture those seniors. I mean, we do know that seniors want to downsize or
Mhm.
transition one way or the other. And what Home Inc. is doing, is planning to do, is to have, units for purchase, units for rent, seniors, to the degree that there's a senior focus, seniors that vacate their homes will go to someplace in town, hopefully. And then that frees up those houses for other things, purchase, rental, combination of thereof.
And some of those seniors don't see themselves as seniors. They
Mhm.
want like one-story homes with little maintenance for roofs or side yards. So they're looking to downsize,
Mhm.
looking for low maintenance housing accommodations. And those could be apartments, townhomes, duplexes, a variety of products
Mhm.
that.
So if we move forward and look at opportunities, it might not be possible to disassociate opportunities with parcels. On the other hand, I mean, if this conversation is going on, and I don't. is this still on the board? Well, there is the project that Home Inc. Is doing, which will be adding some, I don't know, 20 some.
32, when
30.
it's all done, 32.
And what's the, Denise, the
It'll be
split?
22 apartments that they're gonna rent and 10 that 10 units of row houses that they'll sell
Mhm.
between Marshall and Herman Street,
Mhm. Yeah,
Would
so,
the rentals be income restricted?
probably.
so that project could potentially check a lot of the boxes that we talk about, even from a
Some of the
priority.
need.
Some of, yeah, from a priority
yeah.
perspective, it's low income, it's apartments, you know, it's everything but market rate.
And there's a space for market rates. There's a lot of seniors that want to downsize our market rate.
Mhm.
That 10 would be.
That
that
10
would
is
be market rate.
probably.
And so with
I think it's
rentals.
10 for sale.
Right, with rentals in the pocket neighborhood, it's not restricted income. You can make how much ever. but
Right.
You can get subsidies. You can
Mike.
get Section 8.
Mike,
Right.
Oh, you can, oh, sorry. Yeah. No, just,
Yeah.
I was thinking about something.
'cause
So
they did-
that would include some, like 10 units of market rate.
They're, I don't know how, they're planning on doing 10, 22 rentals and 10 for sale.
Okay, 10 for sale.
So
And-
Okay,
I
Yeah.
don't know how they're doing the income restrictions on the for sale.
Right.
right, that's all I was saying.
Oh, on the for sale
I keep
piece,
hearing
I-
market
I'm
rate.
not sure.
It's not
Okay,
determining the
so
market rate.
talking
Yeah.
about opportunities and understanding that, for example, Home Inc. is building, we have the property on the Kinney Farm that is going to be developed. Opportunities, what opportunities could be land, opportunities could be money, opportunities could be developer, whatever one thinks of as opportunities. So I'd like to look at council and then go to staff because I think you guys have some thoughts on that too. So are there any council members that are seeing any particular opportunities?
Well, I don't know, I guess we own property. So that seems like the most obvious. I think that's what you're getting to next. I guess we're just saying these things out loud. The property that we own seems like an opportunity. The biggest opportunity,
It's huge.
the one with the most control.
Yeah, and I'm gonna defer my comments to staff to hear more about those. But I'm aware of at least 4 properties that we have, so.
Well, that certainly sounds like a good place to start, you
Are
know.
there any opportunities that anyone sees that aren't the properties? Either the, well, if we're going to just focus on our properties, but is there anything else out there, like new developer came to town or working more with Home Inc. or someone has a lot of money that they know that they want to put into housing?
Working more with Home Inc. is my answer to your question, to that question.
Well,
I mean-
there's also a property on the south end of town that it would be nice to see something happen with, but we won't talk about that, I guess.
Oh,
So, I mean, there's also, if you go to the comp plan, there's also areas that if you're willing to annex, I mean, with the northwest corner of
Oh,
the
mhm.
community, definitely
Uh-huh.
could be annexed in. It's still in the urban service boundary.
And the property that's just past the high school on Dayton Street. That's in the urban service boundary too. the
Yeah,
little- I
yes, but
forget what it's called.
I don't think that person would be interested.
Well,
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I-
I mean,
Anyway.
historically they
The-
weren't, but you
the-
know.
The idea
that
of
might change.
annexing, yes, so
Yeah.
that would be enough.
Yes, that would be possible.
I think one of the things, and all the times I've talked to potential developers, and I've always tried to bring up the fact that we need apartments, they never, ever want to go that route. Because I think they just want to do their single family and get out. So I think we do have a great opportunity here because we don't really have the money. We don't have incentives like some big cities do, but we do have land that could serve as that incentive.
When you, Denise, when you say serve as incentive, what do you mean in terms of our owning the land
I
today?
mean, other
and what it looks like?
communities will offer things. They
Mhm.
may offer a $50,000 grant, or they may offer some kind of waiver of certain things,
Tax abatement.
tax abatement programs.
Actually, an opportunity we do have. We're considered rural, so we can get funding, whether it's loans or grants from USAID,
USDA.
from rural development.
I have a list of items for that section of mechanisms that covers some of those things.
Mhm.
So, and I know Brian has some too.
Right, and I guess when we get to that, Denise, I also think we could offer those things. We've talked about doing it in the past. So, I mean, we've done it for Home Inc. We could do it for other developers as well.
And, Aaron Sorrell did suggest that we do that. he suggested that we,
CFA.
develop a request for proposals to gauge interest from local developers on developing the glass farm site. And he also mentioned that we could engage the Home Builders Association of Dayton to assist in marketing those potential sites to interested home builders.
Do we know the current value of each of the properties we own?
That can be figured out.
Yeah, certainly we can figure it out. There's per acre estimates that we have. So we could figure it out. Certainly, there's obviously more values than just the land. So in the case of Glass Farm, the work that we have done with DDC has ensured that we create infrastructure access on the south side of the Glass Farm.
Mhm.
So now we've increased the value of that asset. Might not show up in appraisal, but utilities is that much closer
Mhm.
than it was without that project.
Mhm. Right.
So do we want, if there aren't any other opportunities besides the parcels that we own, do we want to move to talking about that? Is there anything else outside?
Well, I think that's it. It's, what we own, that nothing's being done
So
with.
so I think that staff would be most helpful, like, what are the parcels that we own and that housing could be on, and how would you prioritize them in terms of potential, let's say?
There's two that we own outright that have development opportunity. That's obviously Glass Farm's the biggest, Railroad Lot as a mixed unit development. And that there's been a concept for Railroad Lot for many years. I think now we're talking about a reduce and multi-story space. And then there's one, the Corey Street lot that it's not deeded to us, but there's an outstanding agreement that if Green Mat couldn't build on that lot, that it would come back to the village. So that parcel is 2.5 acres next to 1/2 acre that we own. That's 3 acres. There's some challenges. Obviously, all of our projects have challenges that we need to work through, but they're not insurmountable. In terms of priority areas, for on paper, I think Glass Farm seems the opportunity of greatest value and potential, but it's also the one with the most political risk.
Mhm.
So those are three. Are there any others that either the three of you would think would be potential?
Sound fun?
What was the fourth one that Brian said he
Yeah, I
thought there
heard
were
four.
four? I mean, I can only think of three, the three you mentioned.
Well, we own Duncan Park.
Yeah, if you want to start talking about.
Oh,
Political
sorry.
risk.
We could raise that up and then.
Yeah, I mean, if we have
It makes
things
Glass
that aren't
Farm
already
run.
designated parks, we might want to start
So-
there.
Mhm.
Could I,
you know?
so could I ask a question? So I feel like I have some sense of the political, like when you say there's political challenges at Glass Farm. I guess, I mean, I think that's like political problems are sort of our problems,
Right.
right? So I haven't heard anything that I think of as a political problem. I know that, I guess I'm wondering like, to what degree is there will to work through challenges amongst this group? My understanding has been that challenge in the past has been that exact willingness to do so.
Well, in terms of the Glass Farm, it was not the village government that was going to do those projects. It was homing both of those projects. And a lot of that resistance was against Home Inc. as an organization, was against giving the land for free. And it was also 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. And I think things have changed a lot. So not that there wouldn't be people opposed, I'm sure there would be, but I don't think that's the same situation.
Well, and I guess so just in order, like from an idea of like giving some feedback to staff about the willingness, is it okay to ask like, Or is there anybody here who has a problem with looking into that? That feels like those political issues are still remaining to the degree that it would limit us from taking seriously looking into options there? I'll just say, I don't. It feels to me like we ought to be looking into it. We ought to take it seriously. So I'm just making sure that because I think when I talk to most everybody else on council, we don't hold these concerns. So why would we limit ourselves to things that happened a long
this is
time
just
ago?
my opinion, but I kind of feel that it's not as big of an issue as it used to be. Okay, you've got your buffer area there that's conservation, so which gives all the neighborhoods around it a place that's green space. You've got the solar array on the other side. There's that middle section. I just don't think it's going to be as big of a deal.
So is there any how do the council members feel about thinking about glass farm for housing?
I'm 100% with moving forward with glass farm.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that, challenges will come up. Things won't end up how we necessarily think they should go, but that's no reason not to keep it moving on a forward trajectory. And it's not as, just in the community, it's not as a contentious thing as it was a few years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Well, since Johnny's brought it up before, maybe you should weigh in on like opportunities in terms of the infrastructure piece with what we're, not just Glass Farm, but I guess Corey Street and whatnot.
Yeah, before he
Okay.
does, that's important. So the glass farm would have over 20 acres, I think, of potential. Now, the land, it's not, there's parts of that property that aren't ideal for housing because of the soil types and the wetness, but it's the largest parcel. And then you said Core Street is 3, and
But
I don't know
Mary, let me say, you
about
said
the railroads.
the 20 glass farm, that 26 is at the net minus
The
the
glass farm is
undesirable.
44 acres. And there's 8 in conservation, about 7 or 8 in the solar array. And so if you subtract, say 20 acres from 44, you get 24,
And that's,
rounding everything off.
yeah, and that 20 to 24, then that is buildable, you're saying, because you've.
I'm saying that the flat and other staff, John especially probably can weigh in. The property is not the most ideal for housing because there's a lot of it that the soil has a lot of plasticity and there's a high water table.
Mhm.
But housing can be built there, and we've had studies, 2 studies that have for housing. We can. I have those studies. Denise probably has them. I mean, they've been done over the last 20 years. Housing can be built there. We don't want to have real high buildings. We don't want to have real big buildings. So probably attached smaller units, but housing can be built there.
And do we know the net number of acres that are buildable?
Well, I just told you. But we're just
Well, if
rounding
you're
off
saying,
to
if you're
about
saying it's 20,
24
okay, fine.
24 acres.
That's just 20, 24, that's good.
And I don't know how much if we want to talk about Railroad Street relief I'll ask council. And then does council want to consider Railroad Street for housing, given its location for commercial development?
No, we haven't lost. I was trying to get the actual buildable area because it's in the concept plan for Glass Farm, but my keyboard.
Well,
But in terms
you're
of
asking for
railroad, well, I was
Go ahead,
just gonna- Railroad Street, yeah, I mean, that's minimal, we're talking about like, it would be a 3-level building. So there would be maybe 4 apartments on top. So I don't think it's a priority discussion for housing. But it's something we need to develop. But yeah, I wouldn't focus on that today.
And do other council members agree?
I agree with what Brian just said.
I'll just say, I agree, assuming that those premises are accurate, meaning like what I'm interested in are essentially the things where we can do the most building. So if it can only be 3 stories and there's only 4 units, then it wouldn't be as much of a priority to me. If we could build higher than that, and there could be more units, or we could build we could have more, a parking garage that's below it or above it or next to it that can make it so that it's more units, then then that changes my interest. But assuming it's within the concept that's been described so far, it would be a lower priority.
Well, we get variances. Yeah. I mean,
Well, given
there's-
its location, commercial, I mean, it's also a priority. I mean, if we say housing is so important that we only want apartments there, that's one thing. If we say that's important to have some commercial development, then that changes so that's really more. I mean, my sense is be better to have it for commercial. I mean, not that there might be housing on top, but I don't think it makes sense really to have just a big apartment building there, just because it's sort of the last commercial area we have, I think.
Right.
Well,
Well, I think
and I think
we
the
are.
other option, I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I think the other options like create less, political conflict, than that one. So anyway, so I guess I would just, suggest that we, maybe, focus on the other pieces, but,
The last piece I'll say about the railroad lot is that whatever constraints we've created, it's created by ourselves. We've thought about railroad lot as just being one building on the frontage, but there's the parking area that extends deeper. And we haven't said, oh, well, we could also build that area up because of the parking need. So, there's a trade-off. When you think about it in the context that you thought about it, could you build parking underground or above ground to accommodate all these additional uses? Then that expands the opportunity.
So, Johnny, can you talk to us about what you see as your concerns and opportunities for housing on the Glass Farm and in the Court Street property?
I won't drop it. Yeah.
Get what you're done, then drop.
All right, so let's start with the hardest one first. Railroad Street's the hardest for the electric, so we're gonna take it off the table. And I'll just put my 2 cents in. We need that to be more parking and more commercial, kind of the way that we've designed it from the beginning, instead of trying to put townhouses downtown when we need parking. Corey Street has got a 20-inch sewer running right through the middle of it, plus storm. So we would have to reroute all that. We also have to be able to get that deed turned back over to us. So we're talking about pushing that down the road. Glass Farm, I've said since 2004, since 14 that we should be building on it. Because we wasn't allowed to put 2 acres of solar on it because we wanted to save the rest of it for housing, but then it just sat there and nothing's been done. With the DDC property, Josue, myself, and Denise has worked with them to be able to get access, to get the infrastructure back here. It has always been staff's plan to build back here. Even to the point this year, we're actually running the 8-inch further up King Street to tie into Robinwood and to Fair Acres to be able to help water flow on that side. The building difficulty for the Glass Farm is you do have limestone 4 foot under the ground. So you're probably going to do jackhammer for basements, or you're going to be building a lot of slab homes. It would also be great for apartments because they can put the footer in and be able to go up instead of spreading out amongst the stuff. No matter where you go on that property, you will have to pump the sewer to Dayton Street. So therefore, whether you have a basement or whether you have a slab, it doesn't matter because it's only going to go so far and it's got to be pumped the rest of the way out. DDC tried everything they could possibly do. They still had to put in a pump station, which it will be working, but we have the, that's a mechanical issue that can be solved with no problem. Water wise, it's surrounded on both sides now. After we get this King Street done, we can actually have a loop to be able to help the plat for Robinwood, Ridgecrest, Keystone. That will help that plat. power wise, you couldn't be in a better location. So to simplify it all, Glass Farm is my top number one priority. Corey Street would be number two. Bill Duncan would be off the table to me. But then if you want to think of outside the box, you also own Lawson Place and you can build another apartment on the Wright Street side of it. Should I drop it?
You brought up about the sewers and
Yes.
the need for pumping.
Yes.
We got a lift station design in the project that is
Correct.
designed to handle everything that would come from Glass Farm.
Correct. We did that and we would
With
have to change it.
PVC.
We would have to change a pump out, but yes, the pit is designed to be able to handle from Glass Farm to that. The pipe is oversized to be able to.
That was going to be my question. That's excellent.
Yeah,
So,
so do
yeah.
you think that would be upgraded would just be the motor, because the motor is designed for the development side, we need a bigger motor above that.
You need your mic back.
So actually, Johnny, just to clarify, okay, so,
Yes.
so Glass Farm, sewers, the main challenge, but doable. Corey Street, can you just be a little bit clearer about like what we would need to do?
The deed.
We would have, well, number one,
That-
the deed.
That's
Number-
not to be a problem, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, the main challenge is we would have to have it engineered to be able to, the sewer line comes down past the old mayor's house, Dave Fobert's, and as soon as it gets about 20 feet past Fobert's, it cuts across Corey Street going, and it used to go to the old wastewater plant that was there on that property.
Mhm.
So we would have to get it engineered to go from President's to Corey back up to the front of the property and then down to the plant. So we would basically have to clear it out from all the utilities because there's no way to really build because of where it's located. You would hit it no matter what.
Okay.
And
And
also, I will say that that is a stormwater nightmare right there. So that will be a challenge for whoever builds there.
And what about water and electricity?
Electricity, we have it right there on the Corey Street.
Right next to the
Water,
apartments.
water is it's right there close, but it's still, we can get it there. It can be designed to get there. It's going to take more money to get it there, whereas it's already at the Glass Farm. So it's a matter of moving utility on Corey Street, moving the sewer and adding a water line from I want to say it's on the other side of Green. Well, the 10-inch stops at Limestone or at North College now. So we would have to get a 10-inch water line from, if you want real good water, from North College all the way down Corey Street to what is that Birch that runs up into the neighborhoods.
Mhm. And would it make a
It's doable.
difference? Would it make a difference if you did like an apartment building on Corey versus like, individual housing units in terms of some of those issues?
No, the only thing I caution about anything 3 stories in this area is the water pressure is only done by the elevation of the tower. So you may be better at 2 stories versus 3 stories on anywhere in the village.
Mhm. Mhm. And then,
Or the, right.
cool. And then the last thing is, since limestone and underground parking lots were brought up, wouldn't the railroad property be a huge challenge for doing anything?
It would.
Okay.
It would. We can go talk to Fillmore.
Sure.
I can have
mean,
Fillmore
That
second
just
that.
sounds crazy to me, yeah, so, okay.
Or we could just
So-
go out right now. 'cause
Right.
they're open. It's
So,
open.
coming back to focus, my sense from listening to this discussion is that the most likely place for doing housing is the Glass Farm, especially given how Johnny has described the utilities. Also, the size means that we could build something bigger there than certainly we could on Corey Street. And I'm wondering, so if other council members agree, and then if so, if we want to spend more time talking about that particular site in terms of having a housing group focus on that, where do you think, and I want to get your input.
Well, I'm leaning towards a housing group focusing and doing the deep dive, but with respect to, well, I'm looking down the road. So Glass Farm, we're gonna market it. We're gonna do something. We're gonna do something different than what we've been doing to generate interest in construction. So, but Josue, I think I want to ask the Dayton Business Journal ad for CBE, has that generated any interest?
It did generate some leads, and we have held, Brian and I have entertained several meetings. We've had 3 businesses interested in property. And so we worked through some of those. We have not marketed the Glass Farm, so we haven't had any indication that's open for sale or development.
Okay.
So we haven't really pushed that. So I
Right.
think-
And that's where I was going. I just try to use the CBE effort as somewhat of a gauge and whether we could get folks to
Right.
show up.
I think the Glass Farm would have a different channels for attracting folks. So Denise mentioned from her notes, convening the Dayton area realtors as a body, reaching out to those folks. That group is very well connected and coordinated on the development front. So just going through that entity, we could have access to all the developers.
Okay.
So I think it's coming up, if there's agreement that Glass Farm is going to be a project that we want to further flushed out, which we started through the comp plan. There's a concept plan through the comp plan. So it's taking the next step on that comp plan. And we would have, we know where the channels are to attract
Right.
developers.
Okay.
So Carmen and Gavin, do you think that we should be focusing on the Glass Farm?
From what I just heard Johnny say, Corey Street is it's not a thing right now. It can't be a thing. You've got a sewer line running through half of the property. You can't build on it. Sewer and water, right? Right where Mayor Fober's bees were, about all the way through.
You got sewer runs through the property, water would have to come to the
Okay, is
property.
sewer, like, so here's Corey Street.
Yep,
Here's Mr. Fober's house.
yep.
Here's this bee shack. So is it
Go out to the street
all the way out to the street?
and then go diagonal to Corey Street,
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
right
I
by the
think-
big tree.
Okay, so that's I think that would be just completely off the table. Right, and at this point, I think we should probably focus on Glass Farm.
Can I say one thing? One thing that we're hitting in the prime time, and I think this is a very key point to make, is if DDC takes off and starts this development, it's going to make the property behind it more marketable to other people that want to come in and build at the same time as DDC is. And with them, we can say, we're looking for apartments. So maybe if we put out the RFP that we're looking for apartment buildings, then we attract those people to come in to build the apartments.
Right.
And then one more thing I add to Glass Farm, it doesn't have to be everything out of the gate. It could be phased in. It could be, we could look at what portions or create synergy off DDC development. What can go well with that?
It's 20+ acres, so you could have some
Right.
mixed housing.
Gavin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know enough about so like it sounds like there are some challenges associated with getting something onto the Corey, Corey and President, but I guess I just don't have a sense of what the scale of the challenge is. Just in terms of cost and how much of a impact that is. I was trying to wrap my head around how far away. I couldn't do it fast enough, but how far away something about the Corey and President lot appeals to me because it feels like it's more part of town to me, but I don't know exactly what the difference is in the distance. I like the idea of more density. I didn't know about the water pressure issue, so that's also interesting. Like, if this question of you can only go 2 stories, and then again, I guess the question would be like, what's the cost? And then is there some cost benefit where if you're going to have to pressurize anyway, should you go even higher? That's also like, I don't know, one of the most beautiful vistas in the village, I think. And I could imagine there being like, that'd be a really beautiful place to live and look out over that vista. But anyway, like I said, I really don't care honestly which one of these things we do. It's just whichever one feels like there's the most, the most momentum around, the most flexibility around. So I'm assuming that these are big enough humps that we should go with the one that has almost no humps, in which case, cool.
So given what you've heard, do you think it makes sense at this point for us to focus on the glass?
Sure. I guess what I'm saying is it's hard to have a strong opinion about it without having more information, but if based on what I know now, sure, yes.
And okay, thank you. And Brian, did you already weigh in?
Yeah, but not that I want to challenge Johnny, but the Corey Street property also appeals to me, but yes, Glass Farm, I want to get something going. So,
I mean, I don't think we need to take anything off the table. It's just like, do we want to start with where it would seem at this point anyway, there's the most potential?
sure. And I want to
I think
from the started. So
I think however you look at it, and you get back to what what staff has said, building where building is happening is the time and place to build. So yeah, let's pretend like we're making a decision, but I think the decision is made. It's Glass Farm in that area where there's building happening is the place to build, given everything else that we've talked about. Those things, that the challenges that Johnny shared doesn't take those things off the table. It does dictate priority. And so Glass Farm, I think I'm just a regular old average guy, and I think a regular average person sitting and listening to this would agree that Glass Farm is the way to go.
Yeah, and to just put a little more context into it, the challenges that Johnny's identifying at Corey Street, those challenges were at Glass Farm until DDC came through, right? 2 years ago, we wouldn't be saying what we're saying now because that water and sewer wasn't there. So
Right.
yeah, the DDC helps move Glass Farm into this position where it is now. But
Right.
So if we create a committee or a task force to work on housing, and we tell them that we want them to focus on the Glass Farm, and we've talked some about the kind of housing that we would want, which we could go back to if we want, but what are the kind of things then that we need that group to take into account? What is the information they need? What kind of resources does the village have? What kind of things need to happen that we need to give them direction toward?
are we at the area of mechanisms to encourage and facilitate housing development?
Yes, that's where we are.
Okay, all right. So
Would you like to say anything?
I do. And we're going to break this up into two sections. I think Brian can take the legal framework piece and I'll address the administrative resources. So the mechanisms, we have a ton of mechanisms available at our disposal. The one that Denise just pointed to is creating a community reinvestment zone that will facilitate funding for projects. And I'll let Brian jump in on all the other legal stuff because that's a legal legislative framework. On the administrative side, there are a lot of resources that we have, mechanisms that we have to facilitate housing. I think you've seen the work that we've done with DDC and others to make the projects work, and that is leveraging the expertise that we have in-house. We have a one-stop shop where this team right here represents everything zoning, utilities, building department, administration. And so we are unique in that sense that a developer has very few people to work with to explore all the options and get momentum going through their projects. So I think that's one advantage that we have. having that one-stop shop. There's a lot of expertise in-house that we don't have to pay others to do when we think about flow development and things like that. I've been in rooms where Johnny is telling electrical engineers how to do their jobs. And they come back and it's like, oh, you know what, we reviewed this and you're right, or, other things. So there's a lot of expertise that we have in-house that. Huh?
What happens a lot.
It happens too often. It happens too often, but also Denise as well is like, hey, I think this is gonna be an issue. And so we have a lot of expertise in-house that expertise in-house has really facilitated these projects moving forward. Two big projects we have been very complicated. I think what we put together for a community highlights and embodies that expertise that we have.
Right.
If you want to get more deeper into those mechanisms and resources, we got utilities, we got building department, there's so much stuff that we are able to bring to the table and develop it to make it easier. And we've cut a lot of the red tape out. So for being a progressive community in conservative Ohio, for us to talk about how much red tape we eliminate, we do.
Yeah, so so the land, obviously, we own the land, we don't owe anything on the land, and we own it outright, so that's a huge plus. Can you explain quickly the CRA, exactly what the benefit is if we create that?
Yeah, so that's the Community Reinvestment Act. It's covered in the comp plan. But in short, what it does, it gives us as a community access to funding tools that we currently don't have. And those funding tools are, one, they are grants. They're grants and low interest financing that makes us eligible. But then there's also tax abatement tools at our disposal. Like the tax abatement or tax reinvestments work two ways. One, you can forgive taxes on a project that meets certain standards, or you could look to use future tax payments upfront to offset the cost of development.
What about PACE?
PACE is similar to using future tax payments to reinvest in a project. PACE follows the same mechanism. It's an assessment against property that you promise to pay as property taxes. You're able to borrow that money upfront for energy improvement initiatives. Brian, do you want to jump into the other ones? We got special incentive districts that will work in that same way. You're borrowing against future tax payments. The village is able to back bonds for building. We have one on our books that a while ago, we financed or we backed a bond for a health center in town. So those are other tools that are available to us. Brian, I'm stepping on your toes a little bit on here.
No, not at all. I think, I think when Marianne mentioned PACE, that's tied to, as Josue emphasized, the energy special improvement district piece. And, it's something we've already passed some legislation on and could be a huge incentive that we could leverage. And so, I think there are these, TIF-like incentives that, can really, make a difference. And they kind of all fall under that umbrella. I'm always open to thinking about where, bonding can make a difference, but I do expect, and I think this is where, maybe Josue really wanted to tee up, is not so much the legal, but the political will. And, I think, Kevin, the fact that you asked about, what has happened with our, open for business advertisement. And, and this also relates to the Neighbor for More Neighbors, initiative around trying to signal that we are open to business, we're open to residential development, it does fall on the political body. And, I think related to that, one of the things that I think we've done a good job of is making it clear that we can handle PUDs and we can handle, these bigger projects. So then it really does become an issue. And again, that's why I mentioned the analogy with the zoning proposals is a clear indication that there's the political will. And so that if developers are making the effort, we're not going to switch it around on them, and it's worth their time. And so I think that's something that we need to, I guess, grapple with and think about, is, you know, having a clear commitment. And I think that's what's good about this meeting is, you know, can we get on the same page around some of these projects? And I think if we can, then it's not going to fall on us. I think it's gonna be more about attracting those developers and managing those projects. So I guess that's my short version, but again, I think it's a lot about, you know, clear signals that these are things we want to do. And I think we've got the building department, we've got the utilities. So then we've just got to, you know, be on the same page about what we want to see happen at Glass Farm or some of these other properties. So.
And then the other piece, I have a mechanism, Marianne, is as a market. As a market, we are a very attractive market for developers that are looking to do higher end and provide products to a more diverse community. So we've got Intel that's going to be going near Columbus soon. That's already putting pressure on housing. The concern in the state is, can there be enough housing, and what kind of labor force is that going to represent? I think market as a position for us or as a mechanism can be a very attractive tool.
What about other council members? Particularly, what do you think we want to ensure that committee or commission is thinking about? What are the tasks that are going to need to happen?
Well, I think the first step has been done. I mean, we've got a team that has an approach for getting the word out. So much, and you alluded to Intel, there's so much that's happening in the world that says, this is it, this is the time. So we should not waste any time. I'm saying, Board of Realtors, what's their number? Yeah, you haven't planned. So it's getting the word out. I think that's the first step. Then all the other things, I think some time needs to be spent on weighing out the various mechanisms and which we could get the most bang for the buck, if you will, or the most benefit. So those are the kind of things I think that need to be ferreted out. You know, but again, it sounds like staff is ahead of the curve in that regard. So I'd say, guys, go do you. Get somebody to build houses.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that not just staff is working on this.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear from you all. What do you think is important that when we're going to direct presumably a committee, what are the kind of things they're going to need to know, or if we want to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting here to, you know, think about the Intel thing, think about the market idea. I guess it's like, I don't know for sure, but what I've been imagining is the thing I'm most interested in is figuring out what I think are more affordable units that are making it so that people who work in town can live in town. That seems like one of the foundational components I've heard about. And that feels like would be a good place to start. And the concern that's always been raised has been, can you afford to do it? So I don't think I've heard anybody who's like, no, I don't want to make housing available for people who work here to be able to live here. But the reason it hasn't happened, the assumption is because too many people who work here can't afford to live in a single family home here. I think so. Just to connect the dots, the reason we're talking about rentals is to fill that gap. So I'm just not saying we shouldn't think about Intel and shouldn't think about marketing, but I'm trying to figure out if we're talking about doing a deal that's going to make it so that somebody who's going to work at Intel can live here. That's my first reaction, is that's less of interest to me than trying to figure out how do we make it so that somebody who's working at a currently existing business in Yellow Springs can live here.
Okay, so affordable units for people who live here or have lived here or want to live
Yeah, and then I guess the only other thing I want to say is just that maybe we need to provide incentives. Given the issues that we're talking about around revenue needs and everything, I don't think we should do that first. Like, I think we should try to figure out how do we take advantage of the resources we do have, in this case, land being the primary one, a great team to work with, a desirable community to live in, so on and so forth. Figure out how to see whether or not that's enough before we go down the route of incentive packages, which particularly limit ours and other entities' revenue over time.
One of the things that I heard that I'm interested in specifically focusing on, since we're talking about prioritizing this thing, is the more, and I don't like to use the word affordable because people don't know what that means, but if you've ever had to seek out affordable housing, the Fed says it's about 30% of your gross income is what you pay in rent. But if you'd never had to seek that out as a resource, you wouldn't know that. But I think that's a good place to start. Like, what does that mean? And I don't know, like, I didn't even realize until I don't want to say very recently. It's been like the last 2 years when we first got in-house everything. It was a big deal. And not a lot of communities have that, right?
Mm-mm.
So you're going to, like, Cedarville doesn't, anybody who else in Greene County? Cedarville does now.
Fairborn has theirs.
Fairborn has theirs.
Senior just dropped the county.
Senior just went to what we're doing.
Okay, all right, so, right, no, of course not. You know what I'm saying? Like, and especially to be our size,
Right.
our population, it's just not heard of. So I think that probably, like you kept saying, one stop shop, that made me start thinking about, like, marketing, like there's headshots. You guys are like, come to Yellow Springs.
Yeah.
I mean, and really, I don't want to get too over the top, but really making ourselves desirable and available for and attractive for developers or for people who have ideas about what they would like to do.
At this point, everybody knows Denise in the county.
Well,
Right.
Well, no, just in terms of like
Yeah.
creating an environment where you're known, right? Like you're
Yep.
going to the PTAC meetings, you're going to the
Oh.
housing development
Yeah,
meetings. So
sure.
like we are very connected and engaged. So
Yeah.
it isn't just, when folks think of Yellow Springs, it isn't something in the distance. Like there's people that.
I
people
did
can
not mean
pick up
to
the
imply
phone.
that.
No,
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I was at MVRPC yesterday and talked with Walt Hibner from, Vector, it's now Centerpoint Energy.
Yeah.
And he was just talking about that everybody knows Yellow Springs.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah, we were just
And-
having that conversation.
Yeah,
But
so
so-
it speaks to the
Yeah.
how attractive and how accessible we are.
Yeah,
What we're not gonna have is you.
that's fine, but
Well,
you're gonna get
don't-
somebody
don't-
that's just as skilled and better,
But
more
I
skilled
mean-
than me.
but-
Too soon.
but-
Yeah.
Since we're talking about this and you're gonna be here some matter of
Yeah.
months, not that many, then maybe focusing as this new person is onboarding, making sure that this project is put front and center and anything you need to convey to them about that is happening.
I just want to throw in a sidebar. We talk about folks working at Intel and living here. That heightens the focus on the consideration of reciprocal tax, changes in the reciprocal tax structure. We could benefit from that income more if we make some changes.
So I'm going to say something that has been said a bit, but as we're thinking about marketing this project, I am most concerned about marketing to people who live here and are having a hard time living here or need something else, people who work here and want to live here, people who have lived here and are no longer able to, and also what would be called affirmative marketing to people of color. in particular. Those would be my priorities when we get, that's down the road on a project, but that's the populations that I would want to have this project serve.
There's, just on the affirmative marketing, I'll just highlight that 365 project and inclusive resilient Yellow Springs are looking at that as well. So in an effort not to reinvent the wheel, we suggesting that we keep them in mind when we're looking for some assistance in that area.
I'll just throw in, I mentioned earlier, but just, I agree with your list. The only thing I would add is young people. Yeah. And then I guess I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, since we're like, the other thing that makes me a little nervous about the Intel thing is like, is that I'm thinking about like when we're doing hiring of staff and we're like checking in on like what the values match is, and when people don't get the community, it makes me nervous. Similarly, like part of the reason why I like the idea of people who already live here, people that work here, is that there's an understanding of the community. So the sort of external marketing makes me a little, I don't know. I would prefer to find values match, like find to build on our, I don't know, our community values around social justice and other things. So anyway, I don't know how to factor that in exactly, but so for instance, like it's one thing to go to the board of realtors to think about where to find a developer. I guess I wonder about talking to affordable house, like there are whole whole networks of developers who specifically do affordable housing. So there might be, anyway, just looking out for a values alignment on who's doing our building. I think that also could lead to more understanding and more flexibility on working with us on designs, working with us on changes so that they would build in a way that would match our interests.
So Kevin, I agree with everything you said, but I would also, I guess I should have said and instead of but. And I would hearken back to what was said a little while ago. Folks know Yellow Springs. I don't think anybody's going to work on the west side, the east side of Columbus, and live here if they're not the right kind of fit for this community. I just can't imagine. I would submit that we've interviewed folks here for various positions that weren't matches for the community. That's off the beaten path. But I'm saying I think it's less of a concern because as great as we are, the folks who we might have the biggest differences with would probably tend less to come here to live.
I felt you were also talking about the developer as well.
Yeah. I'm just saying
That's-
holistically looking at these things.
Mhm.
I just, to say it out loud, there are people who are concerned that Yellow Springs is becoming older and whiter and richer and more conservative.
And I'm
And
not
not
doing
in
anything.
like, do they vote for a Democrat or Republican conservative? But like, as in like, to what degree are they really interested in living out social justice on a regular basis?
Mhm.
And I think there's several of those things are statistically accurate. We are getting older and whiter and richer. And so as we're doing the development we have with our land, let's just be really explicit about what we're hoping to do, which is to reverse many of those trends.
Right. I think I've taken up a lot of time now, so I'll slow down here, but I think apartments is going to be key. If we have apartments that folks can afford to pay for, those folks that live here who really run the town, it's really not us. It's the folks that are behind some counter. That's who really runs the town. And if we just give them, they want to rent. They're not typically buying yet at that stage of the typical life. So I think the big thing out of all we're talking about, and since will include apartments, I think that will go a long way in terms of creating something that everybody can afford at some level.
Johnny, I'd like to ask you, given the conversation we've had, are there things that you think either haven't been said or you want to reiterate in terms of if we're getting a task force together, what are the things that they're going to need to know, the charge, whatever, regarding the glass farm?
Regarding the glass farm, I think it's just gonna, I think it would have to be a committee, put an RFP together and then submit it to local builders, local developers. I agree with a little bit of what you said, Gavin, with you got to have the right builder. But I also want to say that, and the right staff, but a lot of the right staff that work here today don't live here. But we fit better in this town than we do in our own towns. So we can't just say, just because you're not in town, we don't want you, because you do find a lot of people that love this town for what it is and what we do here. They would want to come and build here. I just talked to a lady today, totally shocked and off the beaten path here. She just moved here from Houston, Texas, a year ago. She just bought her first house because she was renting a single family house for $2,300 a month on West Davis Street. And she felt that she was being taken advantage of because she comes from Houston, Texas. And she's also got friends of hers that come from Seattle that are in the same similar situation. So they're looking to buy houses to save money. So when we talk about making it affordable, we're doing everything possible, but are some of the landlords doing everything possible on their end as well? So we have to make sure that we get the right builder in here. And with the team that we have and with the people that's going to be on the committee, I think it's a win. We've had it before. We're having it again. We're going to continue to do the best job we can.
So I'm going to move to the next session, the next steps, which is looking at charge for a housing committee, because I think we are on the same page that there will be some group that will be working on this, that will report to council. Is that?
Sounds about right.
So what are the kind of people or resources that we want to have on this committee?
So you want this to be a council committee versus
We
a
haven't
manager's
made that-
advisor?
That decision hasn't been made.
Well, I would be leaning toward the manager's advisory committee as opposed to a council thing. We talked about red tape a little while ago, and I think
And
I think
the
an
reason
advisory
for that
board would be
being
more
what?
nimble and
What?
effective. Being more nimble
I mean, because it doesn't have to have open meeting.
Various administrivia related, all the things, all of that. And it's just, when it's just been harder to do, formal meetings as opposed to advisory committee meetings, in my opinion. It's not, by no means are we trying to hide anything. It's just about being effective. And as slow as all these kind of things take, in the grand scheme of things, the window of opportunity is really not that long. So we need to move with a quickness.
Can I just interject and suggest, instead of like talking about council or managers committee, we talk about the elements that we want? Because
But
I
that
mean-
is what I was asking.
okay, yeah, I just, because I guess
Question.
in a lot of ways, I think that's like an artificial distinction, at least in my experience with the finance committee. So yeah, so I would say talk more about like what we want, to make this committee effective. So
Since you are talking, would you say what you think you want to have on the committee? Whether it's the type of people or the resources or.
yeah, so I mean, the things that I think are effective in the committees that have actually done real work are having 1 or 2 active council members, having staff involvement, and and then I guess thinking about other expertise, but from my observations with the former Housing Advisory Board, I think some folks that were involved weren't really invested in the ultimate goals. So I think it starts in-house with, commitment from council and staff working together. And then we kind of branch out from there. So
Gavin and Carmen.
I agree with what Brian just stated, because it feels a little bit like when it's like, oh, so you want this to be an advisory committee or do you want it to be a council thing? It feels like we're getting into the weeds a little bit because we're not there. We're not there. We just now decided in the last hour that Glass Farm was what we're going to work on. So I feel like we need to take a little bit of time to figure out the dynamics of what that's going to look like instead of hopping, like, I just want to stay on task.
So did you answer the question, what she's asking about what elements you think should be represented in whatever the group is called?
So the ones we talked about, obviously,
Mhm.
The affordability for, whoever's definition that is, I have my own. What kind, what type, we're thinking about apartments and maybe some attached units. And that it's going to be we're going to start with it being at Glass Farm. It's been stated already.
I don't feel strongly about the makeup of a committee or what seems to me like it's just a question of like, do we have project management? So who's driving it? I assume that's going to be staff, but like, so then it's just a matter that maybe this is like an accountability. I don't mean that in a negative way, like a sounding board,
Yeah.
but something to like keep the process moving, to have a timeline. But in terms of like what, again, I feel like I don't know enough at this point to know, like, are there particular skills or something that are missing? I don't, honestly, I feel like I would probably rely on staff for more of a perspective on that. It feels like we've got a lot of the pieces here. We need to put them together a little bit before we.
I don't think that,
Add more
I
people
don't
in.
think it's going to be, it cannot work if it is either or. It has to be both and. So,
Yeah.
Both and what?
yeah, I mean,
Both and what?
Brian.
Well, yeah, I think what Carmen's saying is kind of reiterating, like, again, why I think the finance committee works well is that we're all meeting for we've got a common intention and we're trying to work together to vet a lot of these challenges with budget and whatnot. And I think that's what we're talking about with housing. So that's why, I feel like a lot of times when we talk about like what specific type of committee it is, it's more about like, kind of like toggling between, I don't know, like power struggles or something, I guess, to be like direct. And so I just want us to be, I think this committee is going to be successful if we're all on the same page about the goals. And, we've been talking about throughout our goals sessions and everything is just, we're going to be effective. And I think this is my interpretation of Carmen, what you're saying, it's not either or. We're going to be most effective if we're just collaborating on this. And so that's why I guess I don't think we need to name it. So, I'm happy with, Josue like calling the meetings or whatever, but I just want to make sure that it's an intentional, authentic collaboration amongst the team. So
are you just suggesting just a call for volunteers in general then? And because I thought you were looking at first areas of expertise. With the Housing Advisory Board before, we had realtor people, we had, affordable housing people. We had like a mix of different.
I think we can have like ex officio style, like for that. but I think we've got the team that can move this forward. And then if we need to invite folks in for, advice and whatnot, that's great. But I guess right now I'm not looking for those other elements unless they're needed. So
I think from a resource, skills, knowledge, and context between council and staff, we have what we need. Looking back at what worked well with the Housing Advisory Board, we had individuals with strong ties in the community and a pulse on certain elements of different projects. So we had a realtor, we had community development folks, business owners. So they brought in a perspective to gives us that pulse and tie into the community. What didn't work so well was that the same people turned against the project, that they provided input and said, move forward with these projects. So what do we need to Brian's point would be, what do we need those external resources to be? I like the idea of still having a realtor on involved. Would it be the same one we had last time? Probably not. We think we can reach out to the realtors and maybe have either they designate one or find one that strikes the right balance between the realtors. Because I think it helps get the pulse of what's happening on the grounds. But I would just say we have all the skills, resources, expertise here at the table.
So I'll weigh in. I do believe we should start in-house first with 2 council members and staff. And as we need, and I do think we have a lot of resources right here within this group. I think we will need some other resources. Clearly we need a developer at some point, but we might need a group to help do outreach to the community, but I think it makes sense to start in-house. So is there anything else about that anyone else wants to have input in terms of what we would want on the committee?
Ooh, can I just make one comment? And that is, I think that the communication piece is really key and something that just was inevitable. But when we were working with an outside private entity, certain things couldn't be publicly disclosed. I think now that if you're looking at the glass farm as a village project, you can disclose, I think, a lot more on an ongoing basis and just automatically do away with some of that pushback that happened with the need to keep some things private previously. But I think that should also be a key feature of the group, as is how are we communicating back to council and the village on a regular basis, and in what manner, and how are we receiving feedback from them, and in what forms.
Thank you.
yeah, and I think, to me, that's when Gavin used the word accountability. That's the way I think about it as well, is in that positive sense of, the communication flow and just regularly checking in. So not to speak for you, Gavin, but when I say accountability, that's the way I think about it. So.
Johnny?
Marianne, I'd like to go back to what Kevin said. I think one of the major things that we all need to keep in mind is we need to put a completion date on this so we do not lose our window because we're too busy to meet, too busy to do this, oh, we want to look at this. We need to be able to all agree upon a group. We're going out and this is the date that it's got to go out, no questions asked, or we're going to lose our opportunity.
Do you have a sense, do you want to put out a sort of a kind of
I think we
timeline?
got to have it out by July of 23. That'd be my guess.
The RFP.
The RFP. Because that'll give the other development time to maybe start. And then we should have ours ready to go and then be able to work hand in hand.
So I said at the beginning of the meeting, I'm suggesting that Brian and I take everything that everyone has said, condense it and bring it back. I don't know if it would be not Tuesday, but the following council meeting, with a proposal both of how to do the committee and the charge of the committee, and then have council sign off on that.
So I guess my only 2 cents would be, could you work with Josue on that too, so that there's that collaboration that we talked about
Sure.
was happening right from the very beginning?
Sure.
Because I think I agree. I don't know. I would trust Johnny on the timeline, but that gets back to me of like the project management piece of like, let's not let it drift too long before we start getting real about the need to, and I don't, it's like momentum is key. Like, we got some good discussion going here. Let's keep the momentum going. And on some level, the more people that are part of that next conversation, the more I trust that there won't be a disconnect in where we go from this conversation.
Okay. We can set up a time for when you get back into town. Any
Yeah, and I
other-
feel like, well, I just want to underscore because I feel like that has become more of the routine recently, is that council members aren't just bringing things to the table, but they're talking to staff. And I mean, yeah, so I think we got to continue to do that. And, I saw that recently with the climate action meeting we had the other day. And so, yeah, so I think that's becoming like common practice. So I want to support that 100%.
Just to be clear, when I say Josue, I also if that means we're only ever supposed to talk to Josue and then Josue talk. But if staff means that, Denise or Johnny, obviously, whoever it makes sense from, the point is, whoever it makes sense from staff to be involved in that. I just don't want, obviously, we really respect y'all's expertise. I just want to make sure that was clear.
So what we could do would be to, Brian, Josue and I come up with a proposal, run it by staff before it comes, well, Denise and Johnny, I guess, particularly. And I don't know, maybe our attorney, finance officer, before it comes to council. All right?
Yes.
Is there anything else anyone else wants to say? Or do you want to get out of here early?
I think getting out of early is in a lot of people's best interest.
I feel compelled to comment on one thing. Because I think there was a part of the conversation that I don't want people, I guess the public, to misunderstand, because it reminded me of a yucky meeting I attended where there was this whole thing about like outsiders ruining the community character. And I don't think that was anyone's intention. But I think, I liked what Johnny said about a lot of folks that work for the village really are, a part of this community, even though they don't live here. So I just wanted to distinguish like affirmative marketing, where we're like recognizing our values, versus this idea that, we don't want these other people to come into Yellow Springs. And so anyway, I don't think that's what anybody meant, but because that bothered me so much when I heard that last year, I just want to be clear that I don't think that's what anyone's talking about here. And ultimately, what we care about is diversity and promoting our village values. So anyway, felt I needed to say that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any last word? Well, it's been a good conversation. I think we got a lot. I think we have an idea for moving forward.
Indeed.
So,
Here,
do I have-
actually, one more, just one last thing.
Okay.
So we talked about so it seems like we've got a lot of clarity on the glass farm. I guess I want to make sure that staff in particular hears. I think what I heard from council is that doesn't mean we're not interested in looking at these other properties. And that, so when I'm hearing about things like this deed issue at this, Corey Street, like, to me, these are still things like start, to your point, prepare it so that start doing the steps so that in 2 years, this other one that wasn't a deal, that one might be a deal too. So I hope you're hearing that. That's like, there's a priority, but there's clearly, keep other things moving too.
Yes.
Amen.
Making sure.
Please.
I don't want to get all laser focused and not get the deed, you know?
Okay. Okay,
Cool.
do I have a
The actual
motion?
deed.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All right.
All in favor? Just leave.
Aye.